So let me welcome Connor Stewart and Megan Johnston to kick us off today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Johnston,
And I'm Connor Stewart.
and we are honored to be here from the University of Kentucky. And we're so excited to share with you our experience in creating a sustainable interdisciplinary research journal at an R1 institution. So, before we begin, I would like to go over a brief outline of what we'll be covering today in our presentation. So, first, we'll start by introducing Aperture, which is our interdisciplinary undergraduate research journal at the University of Kentucky and the mission behind it. Then, we'll walk through how we got to where we are today. So, the institutional and the administrative steps it took to get the journal established, the development of an inclusive review process in order to assess submissions from a wide range of disciplines, and even the creation of leadership structures and training systems so that we can make sure the journal can grow and continue long after the leadership members graduate. So, in the June of 2023, we held the very first meeting to begin building what would become Aperture. So, from the beginning, our goal was clear to create a student run, peer and expert review undergraduate research journal that would allow for undergraduates across various disciplines to be able to have a meaningful and accessible way to publish their work. And what followed was a year-long process of building the journal from the ground up. This was working with university leadership, administrative offices, and faculty advisors in order to take our vision and turn it into something that was functional and, of course, sustainable. So, what we're going to be sharing with you today includes some of the challenges we faced and the solutions we've developed, from navigating bureaucratic approval processes to even adapting our internal structures and workflows as the journal grew. So, Aperture was selected as the journal's title, as it means a space through which light passes in an optical or photographic instrument. And this is supposed to represent how research brings new things to light and it drives innovation. And so, Aperture exists to make more visible the rich and diverse scholarship that's conducted by undergraduate students at the University of Kentucky. And this includes not only what you traditionally think of as research, such as lab based or field based research, but also creative works. Because we recognize that undergraduate research can take many forms and that students deserve to have a way to share their contribution to research, whatever form it may take. And as such, Aperture is a digital journal. So this allows for multimedia elements such as video and audio and other different types of media in order to expand how we interact and present research. So, as we started from scratch, one of our biggest challenges was trying to understand the bureaucratic steps that were involved in creating an undergraduate research journal, such as gaining institutional approval, developing legal documentation, and even creating submission systems. So, in order to do this, we partnered with the University of Kentucky's Office of Undergraduate Research. With the support from the office, we were able to develop a leadership team consisting of two co editors in chief and four committees: editorial review, publication and productions, design, and marketing and outreach, and all led by designated chairs. So, the editorial review committee was in charge of providing constructive feedback through the peer review process of the submissions. The Publication and Production Committee was in charge of trying to making sure they upheld the double-blind review process, and then also making sure to handle the copy editing of the submissions. The Design Committee created the graphics for our online content and also formatted the journal layout. And then our marketing and outreach team was there to promote Aperture through social media platforms and to also make sure to host workshops and tabling events to spread awareness about Aperture across campus. After this, we worked on creating our journal's brand. So, selecting our name and creating a visual identity. And this was done in conjunction with UK Public Relations and Marketing. And then finally, we worked with UK Legal in order to design all the necessary forms and policies that we needed for the journal. Things such as our intellectual property agreements for the principal investigators and any co authors, and even creating our bylaws to outline how our roles and responsibilities would be and ensure planning for succession of leadership positions in the future. So we also started by creating our initial student submission form. And in addition to that, they also had faculty and co-author agreement forms. And this was to ensure clarity and transparency during our submission process. So we wanted to make sure that any contributor to the submission was properly acknowledged and that any permissions were already in place before we even began the review process. So then we also created a review process that would ensure we had a certain standard of rigor and quality in the submissions that we accepted for the journal. So after the submission was approved by the principal investigator and any co-authors, it was sent to UK Legal first to get approval regarding intellectual property and stuff like that. Then it was sent to our student editors on the editorial review committee, and they meticulously checked for errors and made sure that the submission adhered to our journal's guidelines before it was sent for feedback from experts in the submissions field, such as faculty at the university. All that feedback was then returned to the student, and after they made corrections and we had a final check, then the submission was ready for publication. And as we are an interdisciplinary research journal, we of course couldn't really rely on a one size fits all kind of criteria for accessing our submissions. So instead, we created a peer and expert review process that ended up containing multiple rubrics. And these rubrics were tailored to the different disciplines that we accepted submissions from. So we worked in conjunction with faculty from various departments across the campus in order to design these rubrics to be specific to those disciplines we were accepting the submissions from. And this was to ensure a fair evaluation of the submissions from creative works, scientific works, and even humanities based works alike.
So, thanks to all of the effort from the team on the first edition and our focus on marketing the journal, we were able to grow the publication rather significantly regarding our second edition. In fact, our second edition experienced a 257% uptick in submissions received. And while this was a clear sign to us that our marketing efforts were effective in carving out a space for Aperture Journal of Undergraduate Research on the University of Kentucky campus and our greater research community. It also brought with it scaling issues in regards to our established workflows and practices, as well as certain personnel education issues. So we created this graphic in collaboration with our Office of Undergraduate Research to explain and visualize the significant amount of collaboration that occurs between our respective committees. So once our co-editors in chief receive our submission with our three necessary forms and UK Legal approves the submission, the first committee to actually interact with the work is the Publication Production Committee, who, yes, is responsible for copy editing, but probably their most important role in this beginning stage is removing identifying information, ensuring that our double-blind review process is upheld, because then the submission goes to our editorial review committee, where it goes through multiple rounds of student review, which this is actually where the second edition team created some significant changes. In the first edition timeline, there was a 14-day turnaround between the student editorial reviewers had 14 days to provide their suggested revisions, but that really wasn't feasible when submissions go through two and sometimes even three rounds of student editorial review before faculty review. So we had to shorten this turnaround time to 7 days to accommodate our student reviewers dealing with more than twice the number of submissions than they did in the previous year. But this is also an opportunity for our student authors to grow as undergraduate researchers, since they can use our feedback from our student and faculty editorial review to significantly improve the submission. And then after this process, the submission returns to publication and production to replace that identifying information and final copy edits before being sent to our design committee for final formatting and being placed into the journal. Now, there exists significant collaboration between our publication and production and our editorial review committees, but there's also a ton of collaboration between our marketing and outreach and our design committees. In fact, another notable change that we made from the first to second edition was we combined our marketing and outreach and our design committees in order to give students in those respective departments a more active role throughout the entire submission process, since our marketing students typically are most active in the beginning of the process in regards to recruitment and garnering submissions, while the design committee is most active at the very end when the journal is being constructed. So in combining them, those students have an active role throughout the entire process, which promotes more regular involvement in our journal. So this graphic was pretty essential for accomplishing our goal of educating our committee members who might not have been involved in the first edition on how our committees work together in a very collaborative process, despite the fact that their individual roles seem inherently isolated. And with all the work that we've done over the past 2 years, we want to make sure that Aperture remains a successful literary research publication at UK after its founders and current leaders have left the university. And while our staff advisors in the Office of Undergraduate Research are brilliant, Aperture is first and foremost a student-led endeavor, so recruitment is a student responsibility as well. And that is why an early recruitment timeline is crucial for Aperture's success. By selecting future executive board members by no later than halfway through the spring semester, this gives the opportunity for a smooth transition of leadership between academic years, because the newly selected executive team members have the opportunity to speak to those who are currently in their intended positions, ensuring that they have the necessary training and wisdom needed to hit the ground running in the next academic year. And now, regarding committee members, by scheduling trainings at the end of the summer holiday, it gives not only an opportunity to make sure that every committee member is on the same page in regards to our practices and standards, but also it creates more valuable time that can be used in the fall semester to focus on marketing the journal. Which, speaking of marketing, it's probably the most useful practice that will ensure Aperture's continued success. Our regular tabling events on campus in both the fall and spring semesters, our informational workshops, our regular presence on multiple social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok, as well as our existing collaborations with the Office of Undergraduate Research's marketing team, have been essential in not only increasing awareness of Aperture, but also garnering a larger number of submissions and influencing more members of our campus community to serve on our respective committees. And aside from marketing and student recruitment timelines, we're very selective with who we decide to who should be our co-editors in chief for each submission. So this shows our founding, current, and our future co-editors in chief. And when selecting these leaders for the second and third editions, Aperture and our staff advisors were very mindful in the fact that they needed to have a familiarity with the journal, since Aperture has been at its most dynamic in our first and second editions, what with building the journal from the ground up in the first edition and then troubleshooting scaling issues in the second. We wanted to make sure that these co-editors in chief either had previously participated in the first edition or are already familiar with the journal by their involvement in other Office of Undergraduate Research programs. So this is our current leadership chart for Aperture's second edition, and this actually doesn't show everyone. On our editorial review committee, we have 8 members. We have 5 members on our marketing and design committee, and we have 3 members on publication and production. And by selecting young students into entry-level leadership roles on Aperture, they have the opportunity to ascend the journal's ranks, ensuring that by the time they reach the top of the student hierarchy in the co-editor-in-chief position, that they have the years of experience needed to ensure that our journal is a success well beyond the graduation of our founding and current leaders. And at the end of the day, Aperture is an output of University of Kentucky's research enterprise, and so maintaining that level of excellence is always paramount. So we wanted to acknowledge our mentors and supporters, Dr. Chad Risco, Jesse Jones Bowman, and Haven Patrick at the UK's Office of Undergraduate Research for their support and dedication. And also thank you to our organizers and sponsors at George Washington University for inviting us here to share our work with you. And with that, we will be opening the floor to any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, John, and thank you for inviting us here today. So I'm Tom O'Toole-Mills. Up until very recently, I was the Research Services Coordinator at the University of Essex.
And I'm Hannah Crago, and I'm the Open Research Development Librarian at the University of Essex.
Wonderful. And today we're going to be talking about the Essex Student Journal and how we have, us and the library have worked with our students to help provide a range of publishing opportunities for our students in the best way that we can. So just to kind of give you some starting context, because I realise that listening to the presentation just now and some of the others that I've heard from other student journals, I think Essex runs our student journal very differently. So just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the Essex Student Journal, or ESJ, is a multidisciplinary diamond open access journal run by the University of Essex Library. It being diamond open access means that it's free for our students to read and publish in the journal. So that means that all departments are welcome to freely submit and publish their work, both academic and creative. The University of Essex has long had a legacy of student publish, with the ESJ being just the latest chapter in that. The ESJ launched in autumn 2020 and built directly from the previous university-wide journal called Estro, which we'll take a look at in the next slide. So this is probably the thing that differs most from what I've heard of from other student journals, but the ESJ team is composed of permanent full-time staff in the library who manage the journal, and also a part-time fixed-term role to which we hire a new postgraduate research student every year to serve as the student journal editor. This dynamic has allowed the library to help ensure there's kind of sustainability for the journal, and we've done that also by tying it to the university's open access goals, which has allowed us to justify more funding for staff time and our own licensing our own publishing platform called Janeway. And in the last few years, since we started the journal and established the systems and processes to kind of get it all running properly, the team has worked on a variety of different initiatives to increase the value of the ESJ for both students and the university. This has helped to provide as many and as diverse opportunities for students as possible, and also helps the university keep seeing it as a valuable asset that it should invest in and keep supporting. And so, Hannah, if you want to slip to the next slide. So who are we? Because we're obviously not students. Let's just talk a little bit more about that. So we are from, or were from, in my case, the library's permanent staff who helped to manage the journal. So I'm Tom. I was the Research Services Coordinator at Essex up until a couple of days ago, and was with the ESJ team since 2022. I worked with the past 3 editors to help grow the journal and expand its activities. So, for example, working on the first 2 Essex Student Journal conferences and preparing the journal for our creative writing relaunch. And so a lot of my focus was on expanding communication surrounding the journal to help raise awareness and with students and staff. and Hannah.
Yeah, so I'm Hannah, as I've already said, and I've been working with the Essex Student Journal since we relaunched in 2020. So I spent quite a lot of time during 2020 getting our publishing platform and processes all up and running. And I also worked closely with the first 4 editors to re-establish student publishing at Essex really and grow that as a movement. So now I manage the entire research services team, of which the Essex Student Journal is just one part.
Yeah, and so the third member of the Student Journal team unfortunately can't be here today. The current Student Journal editor, Philip, is off in Kenya conducting research for his PhD. And so whilst he can't be here, unfortunately, we will be telling the story of the journal through his and previous editors' achievements on their behalf. So, and it is really a shame that Philip can't be here today because the ESJ's story is very much one of Essex's students. So since relaunching in 2020, the ESJ has employed 6 postgraduate research students as student journal editors, published over 75 pieces, including at least 6 creative writing pieces, turned over 56 undergraduate or postgraduate taught students into published authors, and enlisted the aid of over 186 PGRs as peer reviewers as well. And whilst these achievements have been underpinned by the continuity that kind of Hannah and I's roles have provided, each student journal editor has been instrumental in shaping the ESJ in their own way and helping to engage the student community to help achieve the success that we've seen over the past 5 years. And as already mentioned, the story of kind of student publishing and student involvement goes back even further than the ESJ. So very quickly, before the ESJ, the journal that we were built on was ESTRO. So ESTRO stands for Essex Student Research Online and was operational between 2008 and 2019. In addition to ESTRO, some of the departments had their own department-specific journals, but ESTRO was the one that offered opportunities to all students, again, as a multidisciplinary journal. And that was very much student-led and student-run, with students being the authors, the editors, and peer reviewers too. Throughout its lifetime, ESTRO was overseen by multiple teams across the university, and as a collaboration of students and academic staff, it enjoyed great success, as you can see by some of the figures on the screen there. However, when the host team underwent a restructure in 2019, they reached out to the library's recently formed research services team to see if we'd be interested in being the new home for the journal. And the team at the time, so Hannah and Kat, saw its potential as Diamond Open Access Journal and as a means for advocating and educating on open research, and so took it on. ESTRO's publishing processes at the time were very kind of informal and labour intensive, so things being submitted by email, tracking what's going on through spreadsheets, and publications being uploaded as PDFs onto the university website. And the library wanted this to be a new chapter for student publishing at Essex, where we could provide a more professional service and opportunity to our students. And as a result, we successfully made the case for the licensing of an open access publishing platform called Janeway, and an increase in staff time dedicated to the journal. So we managed to get the funding for that.
So I think it's where I take over, Tom, is that right?
Yeah, go for it.
So at that stage, once we'd established the funding for the editor and for the publishing platform Janeway, that was really where the Essex Student Journal was born. And we decided at this time to rename from ESTRO to the Essex Student Journal, just to kind of capture that rebrand and the change of the journal, and to kind of make the title of the journal do what it said, and make it clear to people what we were aiming to do. So it was at this point that we hired the first Essex Student Journal editor, and our student editors' achievements really provide a good timeline for looking back on everything we've achieved with the Essex Student Journal since we took it over. So what we're going to do now is speak through the main things that we've achieved over the past few years in the context of each editor and what they have individually brought to the role and to the journal. So our first editor was Lena, and Lena worked with myself and my then manager Kat to get the Essex Student Journal ready to relaunch. So Lena spent a lot of time laying the foundations for the look and feel of the Essex Student Journal, and we've maintained much of that up until today. She wrote the copy for the website, generated templates for our publishing platform, and also planned our official launch party, which unfortunately did have to be held online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Lena also worked with our own digital systems team in the library and the team at Janeway to begin conversations around ensuring our publications could be compliant with web accessibility standards. And we're proud to say that the work that they kind of did around that have been the foundation of Janeway's accessibility standards and templates since then, as they've grown themselves from quite a small company to having lots of journals now that they host from that platform. So Lena put in lots of hard work and lots of dedication to the journal, but unfortunately we weren't yet able to go public with the journal, and so Lena never actually edited any papers, but she left it in a great position for our second editor, Sarah, who then had the exciting role of launching our first call for papers. So this was actually quite difficult for Sarah, because at the time, during 2021, much of the university was still working exclusively online due to the pandemic. So it was quite difficult to get that student engagement, particularly when Istro hadn't been operating for a couple of years by this point. So there wasn't that kind of captive audience there. So Sarah worked really hard on writing engaging news stories on the Student Journal website that we shared more widely across the university. And she had kind of specific target audiences in mind with these news stories. So, for example, she put out a specific call to arts and humanities, where we were seeing quite a lot of social science and health engagement. And she also did some targeted campaigns around specific topics that would cut across different disciplines. So things like International Women's Day, for example. So all of the work that Sarah did had a really big impact on increasing our student body's awareness of the Essex Student Journal. So when Daphne took over as our third editor, and we were back to a more campus-based experience at Essex by that point, student engagement could take more of a traditional approach. So Daphne was able to take the Essex Student Journal to welcome fairs, to our Freshers' Fair, for example, and also to conferences that were being run within individual departments. Through this, we saw engagement with the journal steadily increase, and alongside managing that increased engagement with the journal and increase in submissions, behind the scenes, Daphne also undertook an enormous project to migrate all of the Istro archive that was previously hosted just as PDFs on the website, as Tom mentioned, over to our publishing platform. So this brought much greater visibility of these publications and visibility for their authors, particularly as content that we published through our publishing platform would become indexed within Google Scholar. So doing this expanded the reach of the Essex Student Journal further, and allowed a better utilisation of the fact that these papers were published under open licenses, as they were much easier to discover and more accessible as well. As well as this, Daphne was the first editor to really explore the educational potential of the Essex Student Journal. So she ran workshops for potential authors about converting papers into publishable works, so kind of the difference between an assignment and a published paper, that kind of thing. And also ran workshops for our peer reviewers, who are all PhD students at the university. So this started some of the great work around using the Essex Student Journal as an educational tool, which I'm going to come back to talk about a bit later on. Now I'm going to hand back over to Tom to talk about our most recent editors.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. So Aisha joined in autumn 2022, just before I joined the team as well. And now that Daphne had digitised the Istro archive, could focus all her efforts on increasing awareness of the journal. In addition, she also started a new project, which was our first special issue on equality, diversity and inclusivity. And so with these aims in mind, she managed to build lots of new relationships with multiple teams across the university, and similar to Daphne, represented the journal at multiple events as well. So in particular, she worked with the Black Researchers Hub, which is an initiative at Essex dedicated to providing opportunities to Black students to ensure, and worked with them to ensure that the ESJ was visible and welcoming to them. She also attended multiple departmental conferences for the first time to speak directly to students about the journal. She also worked with the library's newly expanded communications team to post regularly on social media and ensure each publication was shared as widely as possible. And she was also the first editor where we posted an end-of-year social media wrap-up to highlight her and the team's successes that year, which was very popular. And as a result of her engagement work, Aisha received 30 submissions in her year, up from 10 the previous year. And so when Aisha left and Kimia joined, the journal had grown substantially. And in Kimia's year, we saw a lot of new initiatives, or started a lot of new initiatives with the ESJ. So notably the Essex Student Journal Conference, our creative writing relaunch, and continuing special issues with one on sustainability. And so we decided that to offer students the experience of presenting at an academic conference, we would host the Essex Student Journal Conference, where previously published authors were able to present their work to an audience of students, academic staff, friends, family, and from across and beyond the university. It was a great opportunity to showcase the journal and provided additional experience for our presenters for their CVs. Also, in addition to kind of expand the opportunities we could offer our students, Hannah had previously asked our literature department at the university to produce peer review and guidance specifically for creative writing. And then once we received that, because we were unable to find much elsewhere, this gave us the confidence to launch a new call for creative writing submissions, and as a result, open up publishing opportunities to a whole new group of student authors. And to make sure that this was manageable, we took a phased approach to ensure that we could open up in stages. By the end of that year, we had opened to short stories and poetry, and since the launch, we have received and published 6 creative writing submissions. And lastly, continuing from what Aisha did with the EDI special issue, Kimia worked with the university's sustainability team to produce the next special issue on sustainability. In this special issue, 11 items were published in the end, including our first 2 creative writing submissions since the relaunch. And as a result of her engagement work and the momentum built up over the previous few years, Kimia received 47 submissions in her year, up from 30 the previous year. Now, this growth was fantastic, but posed an operational problem, I think similar to what the previous presenters was talking about as well. We simply didn't have the capacity to handle any more submissions at once. And so when Philip joined at the start of the last academic year, we had to rethink how we were going to handle these. So previously, we were open to submissions year-round, which have been great for encouraging the growth of the journal, and helped ensure that our students were able to access the opportunity to publish with minimal barriers. But it also meant that the editor was unable to focus on one area at a time and needed to spread their energy between promotions, editing, event planning, and everything else that they had to do all at the same time. And so this past academic year, we decided to trial a new cycle where submissions were closed in the autumn through to the spring, and then reopened in the spring until late in the summer. And this was hoped to help control the number of concurrent submissions and allow the editor to focus on fewer aspects of the journal at a time. And Philip handled this change fantastically. He cleared the backlog within a few months and was able to reopen submissions earlier than expected as a result. And since reopening in February, these were figures from a few weeks ago, so I think we've actually received a few more now, but we've received 8 submissions in the last few weeks, and managed to publish one already. I think it's actually a couple more now too as well, thanks to our wonderful peer reviewers who are very keen to get things going again. So combined with what was left in the backlog, there have been 17 publications so far in Philip's volume. In addition to the publication side of things, Philip has also played a vital role in organising this year's Essex Student Journal Conference by sourcing and liaising with the 8 student presenters that we had. Thankfully, running the conference last year for the first time streamlined the processes this year, meaning that we were able to focus on some new ideas, such as author Q&As, and getting those sorts of things more smoothly running. The conference only happened a couple of days ago. It was my last day on Wednesday, and we were very happy to say that it was a great success, with 57 people coming from across the university and beyond. and we've already received a wide range of positive feedback on that. And so we now reach the ESJ where it is today and going into the future, where I'll hand back to Hannah.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so we've looked at an overview of what we've achieved over the past 5 years with the journal, but I just wanted to talk briefly about what the impact of all of this has been and what the kind of purpose of all that great work has really been about. So I mentioned earlier about using the Essex Student Journal as an educational tool, and this is something that I feel quite strongly about. So we really want the Essex Student Journal to enable our authors and reviewers to get first-hand experience of the publishing process and help them to develop their skills in research and writing, and for our reviewers who are often doing some teaching work alongside their PhD, to gain skills in teaching as well. For example, when they're marking assignments, it's quite similar to peer reviewing. We've seen through talking to our authors and reviewers that they've found their self-confidence has improved through working with the journal, and they find it really valuable to have something extra to add to their CV. We've also this year won an Excellence in Education Award at the University of Essex, which shows that the educational impact of the Student Journal is really being recognised, which is really great. We also want to use the journal to introduce our early career researchers to publishing. So this includes undergraduate, masters and postgraduate research students. We want all of our students to know that publishing is open to them, and that their work is worthy of being published and that their voice should be heard. We also want them to experience the publishing process in an open access way. We really believe open access should be the norm for academic publishing. And so by introducing our early career researchers to open access right at the beginnings of their careers means that more of our future academics experience open access publishing before getting used to the kind of traditional model of publishing. We're also making more research freely available, which is always great, and we're supporting that kind of open research culture more holistically from kind of the bottom up at Essex. So more widely than our authors and reviewers, we want the Essex Student Journal to be a working example of how Diamond Open Access can work. I do a lot of advocacy work in my role for open access and specifically for Diamond Open Access and encouraging that shift towards that. So we want that open access, the Essex Student Journal, to allow us to practice what we preach and play a key part in that culture shift that we're trying to achieve. If we can bring researchers and academics along with us, they can help us to convince senior leaders and budget holders that we should be investing more in supporting Diamond Open Access more widely than just within our university community. Future plans then. We're hoping to get the Essex Student Journal indexed within DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journal. So we've worked to ensure the journal follows the standards required by DOAJ, and we want to be indexed to really increase the value and value for and visibility of our student authors. It helps us to adhere to more wide open research values as well, and it will continue to highlight the importance of the Essex Student Journal to our researchers here at Essex if they can see us indexed within that database. But as Tom's kind of hinted towards, we need to maintain stable growth with the Student Journal. We want to be able to keep providing opportunities to as many students as possible, but this may now have to shift to being more about quality of the experience rather than quantity, as we don't want that quality of experience to drop, just so we can keep publishing more and more papers. Additionally, where we do expand, for example, if we're looking to extend creative writing to scripts and screenplays, we might need to look towards more collaboration, for example, with the drama department here at Essex. And we also want to expand the academic buy-in that I've touched upon further, both to strengthen the Essex Student Journal and to build upon the foundations of that shift to Diamond Open Access to becoming more normalised. So we started that this year by launching an academic advisory board for the journal, which we hope to build upon further in the coming years. Ultimately, though, our commitment to the Essex Student Journal mirrors our commitment to open research more widely, as we continue to use the strengths of openness to diversify and amplify student research here at Essex and beyond. Thank you very much for listening to us today and inviting us to present at this conference. We're happy to take any questions as well as the previous presenters, and please do have a look at our website, the link there, and get in touch with us by email if you want to do that directly.
Thank you very much. So I'll briefly mention before we take questions, Thomas and Hannah had submitted a proposal to our ethics and publishing conference this past fall, and we asked them to wait until now to present because we thought it would be great for this symposium. And this is our first international presentation at the Student Journal Symposium. So thank you so much. Let's take some questions, and we can have questions for both Connor and Megan and Tom and Hannah. Any questions from the audience? And we'll also look for questions from online as well. I think we have some online ones here. So let's see. We have a question, anonymous question. I was surprised that council is the first pass. What are they looking for? Do they hold up the editorial process? Was this for, I'm not sure who this was for. You mentioned legal, I think, in yours. Yeah, so that's I should say, when I started a journal at GW, I didn't ask for permission. I don't know if you know that phrase. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I just launched it, and then, you know.
So we, like at the University of Kentucky, and I know that at several universities, there's usually a lot of legal processes or certain approvals you might need to get when you're working on something that really impacts something university-wide and involves a lot of people. So for us, working through the Office of Undergraduate Research and having their experience to help guide us, made us realize that we did need to work with UK legal first to make sure, especially since we would be publishing research, and some of that was tied to, you know, professors' labs and the research they carry out for the funding they have, or maybe have like federal ties to that funding. And we want to make sure that that intellectual property was protected and treated the same way as if you were publishing in a normal, like say, journal, that an academic journal. So we wanted to get that first step established, because also we didn't want to waste our time for the student editors. If it was something that impacted that intellectual property, they would have went through that entire process of making comments and giving feedback, but wouldn't be able to be used. So having that first step to go ahead and make sure what we were going to work on was able to continue through that review process.
Hannah and Tom, did you have anything you want to add on that? Did you deal with legal issues as well?
I think we took more of your approach, John, of the ask for forgiveness, not permission, from being honest.
Yeah, that works for me. Okay, let's see. So we have another question from Emmy. I would love to hear more about making online publications more accessible. How did you implement accessibility within ESJ? What would you do differently if you were to do it now? So I know we could have a whole session, even a whole conference on that one.
Yeah, shall I take this on, Tom, as I kind of did some of that when I started?
Go for it.
Yeah. So there's kind of two layers to this. The first was making our Essex Student Journal public facing website more accessible. So having all the right kind of headings and alt text and things on that website, which we worked quite closely with Janeway to develop. But the main thing that we ourselves were involved with and kind of had more control over was the actual papers themselves. So we publish all of our papers in 3 different formats. So accessible Word document, accessible PDF, and HTML format, to make sure that people using any kind of assistive technologies are able to have the same experience, or as close to the same experience as possible as all of our readers. So we spent quite a lot of time doing work on establishing the best processes to achieve documents that would work in that way, adding alt texts, proper headings to tables. At the start, there wasn't much integration with the system, so we did quite a lot of messing about with the code to try and get it all working right on the HTML files as well. But we got there, and actually it led to Janeway creating some more automated tools to enable that to happen. in a more streamlined way. So now it's much easier, and we create an accessible Word document, and then that is able to be fed into the system, and it creates the HTML for us. But we also created a template that our authors have to use when they submit to the journal, which forms the basis of that accessible document, so that our copy editors can do kind of the final checks to ensure it's at the right standard. So yeah, it was a learning curve, but it was definitely worthwhile doing, and it's something that I think we're quite proud of with the journal.
Definitely. And just to add on to that, it kind of ties into that education of our students as well, because as Hannah mentioned, like they have to use the template and they have to understand why we're asking them to provide information in particular ways, which is help to educate them about accessibility standards too. And we frequently get questions about it from authors, where we're pleased to be able to then share that with them too.
Great, thanks. Did you want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, hold on a sec.
This question is for Connor and Megan. Y'all mentioned that you have 3 forms that come with the submission: a submission form, authorization form, and mentor approval form. I was mostly curious if you could explain what the authorization and mentor approval forms are.
Right. So the overwhelming majority of undergraduate research conducted at the University of Kentucky is like supervised by faculty mentors. Therefore, we need their approval. It's kind of standard practice for all Office of Undergraduate Research programs that, like, if a student is, for example, participating in a research conference at our university, that they fill out a form that notifies their PI, in order for their faculty to like be aware of those endeavors. So it's the same thing for Aperture. It would be rather jarring, I imagine, for a faculty member to notice that their mentee published their work without letting them know. And then the co-author authorization form is a similar idea. A lot of our submissions, particularly this year, have several co-authors, for example, from like previous REU participation at the university. So it's important to like notify those authors, just like standard. If you submit to a journal, you're going to have to confirm that you're a co-author for that manuscript before it's even reviewed.
I had a question.
Thank you for the presentations. I was wondering if you could all talk a little more about how you are recruiting editors that are fluent in the huge amount of disciplines that you guys have to cover in your journals. Like, how do you make sure you have somebody who has expertise in all the different subjects necessary?
Well, to start, our co-editors don't necessarily need to be fluent in all of the disciplines. What they do need to be fluent in for that position is logistics and regular communication. It's actually the student editors and our faculty expert reviewers who need to be like fluent in all those disciplines. And in reality, they're not fluent in all those disciplines. We just have so many that all of those disciplines are covered. So that's how we establish that, for example. Oh, right, of course. So uh it's pretty targeted recruitment. So a lot of for our STEM students, like the science building is kind of a hub on campus. And they frequently participate in Office of Undergraduate Research programming. So they are frankly really easy to get. The humanities and creative students are harder. However, we have partnerships with our College of Fine Arts, and that dean is very supportive of his students participating in undergraduate research. So he handles taking our like flyers and putting them on his listserv, and that's how we target the typical humanities students as well. Additionally, we have regular presence at our undergraduate research expo every semester. It's essentially like a career fair, but for research opportunities, and Aperture always has a table. And at that event, there's a representative from every college at the University of Kentucky. And so, for example, in January, I walked around to every college representative and gave them Aperture's information and graphics to publish and put out to their students. So that's how we do that.
Just to continue on that, from the foundation for us, that was very important to make sure that we were, like we mentioned before, fairly evaluating based on that type of discipline. And actually, a majority of the founders were more in STEM, honestly. And so we knew that we probably lacked that experience to comment on, say, humanities and creative works. And that's why we used our connections through the Office of Undergraduate Research to reach out to the faculty in those specific disciplines to get their input and advice, to make sure that we were handling it in the most responsible way.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has a question.
Thank you. This is a question for Tom and Hannah. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question about what you said, Hannah, toward the end about trying to or talking to decision makers in order to get more university support generally. And when you said that, it reminded me of what someone said, I think at the beginning of yesterday's session, where they said that in so many words, I think typically universities in the UK universities don't have like offices of undergraduate research. So I'm just curious to know, like, how have you all been strategizing when it comes to how you promote and talk up the journal, in so many words, to administrators at your institution? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a really good question. No, we don't have an Office of Undergraduate Research here at Essex. It's not too common in the UK. I think there's lots of different ways we've been trying to get the message across, I guess. Things like inviting some senior members of staff to our Essex Student Journal conference, for them to see firsthand the impact that the journal has on our students, to allow the students to kind of speak for us on that. I've also been along to some we have directors of education and directors of research here that sit beneath our faculty deans within the university structure, and they have some like away days and things. So I've been along to some of those to speak about the importance of the Essex Student Journal as an educational tool, as well as it being a key example of diamond open access. And even things like the social media presence that we've been developing, lots of our researchers and senior members of staff are on those platforms. So we'll see, again, the kind of impact that we're having from the students themselves. So there's lots of different ways that we're getting this across. We also have the Research Excellence Framework is our kind of research evaluation here in the UK. And there's a part of that that's about research culture. And we've been using the Essex Student Journal as an example of how we're supporting an open research culture. So that feeds into that quite top level evaluative process. So there's a mixture of the kind of bottom up and top down approaches to showing the importance of the student journal. And I don't know how much you guys there are following the current financial situation of UK higher education, but it's not great. And we've got quite a lot of cuts at the moment, but we've managed to keep the momentum going around the student journal, and I think not in a small part because of all of that work we've been doing to prove the value and the worth of the student journal for all those different reasons. So I like to think it's working, and hopefully we'll get to continue with it.
All right, let's see. We did have one more question online. We're almost out of time, but maybe we could be brief. This question was for Connor and Megan on how do you manage a large team of student volunteers? How do you able to manage that?
So many meetings. The individual committees are headed by chairs, so either one or two for the second edition. The third edition, there will be two co-chairs for every committee. Very happy about that. But they have at minimum monthly meetings, and then the executive board meets once a week for an hour. So that's how we manage that. And then as the newest co-editor-in-chief, I also try to regularly attend the individual committee meetings. That way I'm like hearing directly from our student reviewers and our volunteers, not just their superiors.